Welcome to the Only Dream Big podcast, starring your host, Donnie Bedney. Only Dream Big is a podcast where Donnie will share tips and experiences on different topics, such as acquisition entrepreneurship, human capital, and the future of the workforce. He is the president of PSP Metrics and has been in the assessment and human capital management industry for more than 15 years, with the goal of driving change through people. As your guide on dreaming big, let's hear from the man
Episode
himself.
of the Only Dream Big podcast. I am your host, Donnie Bedney. Once again, just another phenomenal individual, person, servant, as he's referenced at times. Jeff Williamson joining us today, and guaranteed, folks, just a number of nuggets that he will be sharing today, and just practical and pragmatic tips, as we always like to share today. Jeff, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Donnie. I've had so much fun in our past conversations, and man, we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways. So I'm excited to jump in and talk about big dreams and leadership and all those kinds of things that you're passionate about as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. One of the big things that we always like to talk about here, is we have individuals who, have dreams, right? We have people who are running organizations, so they have visions for organizations. And years ago, when we met, you just kind of really helped kind of the beginning of a reframe for me, in talking about the power of 168, right? And I now I use it basically almost as a test question, right? To people I meet, like, do you know about the significance of 168? And it's amazing to me the number of people who don't necessarily know. But can you talk to us? Just can you
Sure.
open up and kind of shed some
Mhm.
light for the people about the significance of 168?
Right. The Power 168 really just came from a discussion in a graduate course I was teaching. And the conversation was about how busy people are. And a student came up to me and said, I don't think I have time to do this doctoral program. And I graciously said, I think you do, but let's talk about it. And what came out of that was the reality that no matter who we are, what our role is in this life, we all have 7 days, 24 hours a day, which totals 168. And though I didn't think about the title power of 168 at the time, I just went in and wrote that number down on the board and looked at the group of about 15 people and said, does anybody know what this number is? Crickets. And so then we had this conversation about your busy people, your professionals, your bankers and teachers and attorneys, and you're in this 3-year doctoral program. What in the world have you done? And so we had this conversation about time and what we do with our 168. And so we had some really rich conversations and broke down some things. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about that as we go along. But that's the idea. Was
Okay.
There's 168 hours in every week, and we have the power to impact what we do with that.
Yeah. I mean, just man. So I think that the concept has continued to kind of resonate with me, and at moment of transparency for our listeners and everything, I have not mastered my 168 at all, frankly. And yet, because I met you. You introduced me to the concept. It's something that I continue to be cognizant of. Whenever I think about, like, okay, well, if I want to achieve something and I start telling myself, oh, I just don't have enough time, right? Then I'm always then twisting and saying, okay, well, I have 168, how can I make time, right? Accordingly. Which I think it kind of dovetails into, or potentially is like the antithesis, if you will, of folks that I know we share a disdain for a little bit, which is not the people, but this other word about being busy, right?
Yeah.
And folks who just say, well, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I'm busy too. And then it becomes like, it's almost this societal thing.
It's
where
a
folks
badge
are,
of busy, It's like, look at my badge.
That's your thing, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
badge of busy, right? Oh,
Like,
please.
I don't
If
want
you're
that.
listening and you have one, please throw your badge of busy away. Please throw it away.
Yeah. Well, and I've said this before that when I talk about 168 and I talk about my dislike for the response that I'm just so busy, I know they mean well, and they are busy. It isn't that I doubt they're busy. What
Sure.
happens sometimes is when we're in a place where we feel like we just can't add one more thing, it's because we've just kept adding one more thing. And so part of the heart of the approach of Power 168 is that we really have to think about what we value. What do we want
Mm,
our life to look like?
mhm,
And when we do that, I believe we can take a look at to say, you know what, I've got this stack up to here, and
mhm,
about a third of it doesn't really matter in the scope of life. I've just let it others sometimes and
mm.
myself in a wanting to people please, not wanting to say no. I've just let people stack things up, or I've stacked things up.
Ooh, yeah.
And it's often just, it's not that you're so busy because you're not saying no to anything.
Ooh.
And then when we think about, okay, in the scope of, my children are in their 20s, so I'm kind of in that phase where you're kind of going, well, I think I did okay. How did I do? Yeah, kind
My
of,
daughter is 2, so
yeah,
you're
yeah.
letting me
We've
know
talked
there's hope.
about that.
There's hope.
You got so many good days ahead of you, and I did too. But if we think about, all right, as a dad, what do my kids remember from when they were 3, 4, 5, 10, 15?
Yeah.
Was I missing most of their life, or was I one of those dads that I'm like, I was at every ball game, I was at every dance recital, I
Mhm,
was at everything,
mm,
because I wanted them to know they mattered so much that I would miss other things to put them first. Now,
mm,
that doesn't make me dad of the year. It just means that, like, I chose that as my priority, one of my priorities.
mm.
And at times it meant I missed some cool, fun event that I would have enjoyed, but I'd rather see that smile on my kid's face when they get their first hit, or when they do their featured dance in the ballet and all those kinds of things. I'm like, that's my girl. That's
Yeah.
my boy.
Yeah.
And I thankfully I have to honor my parents. They showed me what that looked like early on, and so it's like those moments that I just don't want to miss. I'm going to do my best to never miss those.
Yeah.
So, are all the things in life like that? No, no.
Mhm,
But I think sometimes we've stacked our deck against ourselves, and we
mm.
wind up missing that spring baseball game, or that dance recital, or just that
Yeah.
opportunity to, I used to meet my kids after school at their elementary, and we'd walk up to a little place and get a soda and sit there on a park bench and talk about their day. Well,
Wow.
I've got time for that
Yeah.
because that was my priority. And
Yeah.
again, lots of good people do things like that, but we
Mhm.
can get so stacked up with things that are not that important to us in the scope of life.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't matter in a year, why am I giving it so much energy now?
Mm. Is that a big exercise? Because my follow-on question to what you were talking about is, and wanting to share some practical ways, to
Mhm.
evaluate that. Are there any exercises that folks can take, or questions that they can ask, frankly, to determine that? And so I guess that's one, which is,
Mhm.
is this going to matter in a year?
Yeah, yeah. And in some bigger topics of life, we even ask ourselves, is this going to matter in 5 or 10 years?
Mm,
So yeah, I look at those things and think, okay, going back to vision, values, and desired outcomes. If I look at my values, are they reflect the things that I identify? And I'm a lister. I love my flip charts on the wall. I'm a lister and keeping things written and in front of me.
yeah,
So I always think it's a good practice for us, maybe, monthly or every week or two, to sit down and remind ourselves, these are the things I put on the wall over here, that this is
wow,
my set of priorities. And if
yeah,
I keep that visibly in front of me and I see that all the time, I just feel
hmm,
like I'm better able to move toward activities that affirm and lift up those values in
sure,
practical ways.
okay,
Because I value this, I therefore take this action.
Yeah.
because I value this. I say no thank you to this option.
Mm.
And so we start this sorting process to say, it's not choosing between a bad and a good thing. Sometimes we
Yeah.
have that, but a lot of
Sure.
times the things that stack up that we say cause us to say, I'm just so busy, is like we don't say no to anything, because sometimes we even have to say no to something that's good, but something else that's better gets our
Mm.
yes.
Wow. Saying no to something that's good, something
Mhm.
better gets our yes. I mean,
Yeah.
so in a funny way, did you ever think about, naming the book, like maybe with the subtitle, so like the power of 168, driven by, saying no, or
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. It just
The
they appear to
joy of
go hand
saying
in
no
hand,
or
right?
something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Working on a project now that is related to joy and community and connection. So hopefully that'll be something rolling out next year. But yeah, that
Excellent.
idea of there can be joy in saying no, because every time
Yeah,
we say no, and this isn't my idea, but when we say no to something, we're saying yes to something else.
yeah.
And I love that.
Mhm.
Um, so as a dad, when my kids were coming up and I had to choose about activities and where am I going to be at this time on a Friday afternoon, whatever, it was like I'd say no to something that would have been fun because I'm saying yes to my son or my girls.
Oof.
And when I look at it in that, it's a lot of times it's just framing things in what I would say is an appropriate light. To say,
Okay.
let's see, go play golf with my buddies or go to my daughter's ballet recital.
Yeah,
Easy call. You know, I can
yeah,
go do the golf thing with friends anytime it's not cold.
yeah,
But my girl has this annual ballet performance that's the big end of year show.
yeah,
And she knows I'm going to be off stage holding a bouquet for her and telling her how proud I am. And she'll never forget that. Well,
yeah.
she's 26 now.
Ah,
And those are the things that I want her to kind of go, didn't miss the big ones, man. Way to
yeah,
go, dad. You
yeah.
know,
You were
and
there. Yeah, that's
and,
huge.
and millions upon millions of moms and dads do that very same thing. But my
Yeah.
point being, it's like often we're choosing, where does our time go? Who do we give it to? And
Hmm.
what's the value of that?
Yeah, yeah. So huge, man, huge, and so happy our conversation has taken us in that path, because I think that it's going to be something a lot of folks can relate to. Um, Going back to kind of the origin of the concept. I mean, what were some of the things, and how granular, if you will, as you were
Mhm.
going through that exercise, did you
Mhm.
get with your
Yeah.
students?
Yeah.
At that point, I always was talking to my former CEO, who good buddy of mine, who was a guest couple episodes ago, Joe Grishkowiak, and we were talking about energy, right?
Hmm.
And I was telling him, like, hey man, now that I'm president, like, how do I focus? How can I own more of my energy, right? Because I believe it's gonna take a lot of energy,
Hmm.
right, in order to achieve some of the things that I have set apart. And he said, hey, um, first thing for me is 8 hours of sleep every night,
Yeah, that's a
right?
non-negotiable for me, man.
It, see, look,
Hmm.
greatness.
Hmm.
Jeff and
Hmm.
Joe have said it. I need to do it.
Hmm.
But then if I think about that, right? So what is that? 56 hours a week? Then I'm it's designated for
Yep.
sleep. So I have,
117 left,
yeah,
and you're well rested.
yeah, yeah. It's great. So is that,
Mhm.
is that the
We
way
did.
to, did you go through that?
We did. Yeah, this spontaneous conversation led to what I jokingly call my fourth grade math project. I put it up on a whiteboard, where it's just addition and subtraction. I'm good
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And so we started out with that magic number of 160.